All right, welcome back. Some of you may have thought that the channel was dead. It's not. Just been very, very busy. A couple notes I wanted to mention that this is obviously heavily audio based, but if we get enough subscribers, if enough people show interest, I will be investing more into um, some flair, some visual stuff, some adding clips into the videos, not just having the audio format. But I want to make sure there's interest there before I start putting all that extra work in, interest for the subject material itself. Um, we're here going to talk about the election today. There's been an awful lot that's happened, and we're not going to try to go through all of that. We're just going to discuss some maybe major trends, have a casual conversation about where we think it's going. We're 2 days away right now from the election. This is being recorded on Sunday, November 6th. And we're going to try to make our best prediction as to what's going to happen. So, where should we start?
Maybe we could do a quick overview of what has happened so far. The last time we spoke was the Democrat convention, Republican convention. I don't remember.
Yes, I believe it. I believe it was the Democrat convention. Um, And again, I apologize for having such a lapse in time. There's been so much that's been going on, and when you have a lot we have to work for a living, unlike some people out there, and so you have a lot going on in life, and there's been a lot that's happened since the Democratic convention, that's for sure. So, yeah, what should we mention? The constant scandals, the constant corruption. There's so much to. I mean, if you haven't been following the election up until now, you've missed out on a lot of entertainment.
Well, that's right. This is by far I would argue, the most entertaining presidential election the country has seen in over a century, maybe ever.
And
There's just
arguably also the election with the most corrupt candidate who has ever made it this far.
That's right. It's unbelievable how uh, Hillary Clinton has been ordained the candidate for the Democrats, considering she is under constant scandal. It's just one after the other, and it started well before she was in office. In fact, the Clintons have been under scandal for 30 years. It just doesn't go away. And what people need to understand is if she is president, it's not going to go away. It's never going to go away. The Clintons are scandalous people, and they will always have something that comes up.
And I think it's really telling to the kind of government that we can expect if Hillary Clinton does get back into the White House. Uh, in that you're exactly right. All of this trail of corruption has followed them through their careers as they continue to add more to it. So we can expect the most corrupt president in the history of the country. I am confident of that. There's just so much going on so many. It's not just one scandal. That's common. We have one scandal, two, three, maybe not like 25. So there's a lot going on here, and unfortunately, big surprise, the mainstream media isn't covering it. So if you're not tuned into alternative media, or anti-Hillary Clinton media, at least you won't even hear about a lot of these things, and there's some pretty serious stuff going on. Again, I don't want to go into all that nonsense, and we could spend days, probably years, talking about it because there's so much stuff. But I do want to just make that note that we are looking at an election that is like nothing we have ever seen before, and my argument is that the costs are, or the stakes are very, very high. At the point where we're at right now in the United States and the Western civilization in general, um, we can't afford to make a lot of wrong moves. We have so many variables. I mean, if you're talking about trade, if you're talking about government spending, if you're talking about the national debt, if you're talking about The economy, which we're continually told is getting better, and clearly is not. The working class and the middle class are struggling more than ever. The war after war after war that we keep getting into, the constant threat from Hillary to essentially go to war with Russia. These are very serious stakes, and this election, I think, is really going to set the stage as to where the United States moves forward. In my opinion, we're looking at, if Trump gets elected, there's a chance we could recover. I'm not even going to say I am not delusional. I don't think that he is so powerful that he can just fix everything. Obviously, even if we get down the road to fixing things, it will be difficult. It'll be a difficult road. But if Hillary gets in, I am going to make a prediction that within 15 years we will have one of at least three of these things: a police state, a civil war, or an economic collapse. That's where I believe that we're headed with that option. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's right. But you mentioned these interesting concepts called issues, which this has been a relatively issue-free campaign, at least coming from Democrats. And I would argue that, whether you agree with Trump's policy proposals or not, at least he's proposing something. He started proposing policies a couple months ago. He's made several speeches on it. He was making policy speeches during the primaries. Um, what you see here is a narrative driven by the Democrats and the mainstream media that puts issues aside in favor of trivialities, such as what they would perceive as scandals, such as what Trump said, and tax things that he did that were completely legal. I mean, these little minor issues that are blown up. Meanwhile, over the past couple months, the FBI, we now know, has been investigating the Clinton Foundation for over a year, and has been on and off being investigated by the FBI for her private email server. You have WikiLeaks, who has shown that the mainstream media is totally in the tank for Hillary Clinton. There's no objectivity. It's completely biased. There's all of these large scandals, whatever you want to call them, that should be talked about, but all people have been focused on in the last couple of months, and some of this is Trump's fault because he does get distracted easily, at least prior to maybe 2 weeks ago. But he gets distracted by this and keeps bringing it up, or continuing it. But you know what I'm saying? It's just it's interesting that these large issues that show corruption, criminality within the government, and it's not really being focused on. Although I would argue that the American people in general are more aware of it now, thanks to social media, alternative media, and the internet. But we'll see if it actually makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely, and you nail it there. I mean, what do we have on the Hillary side? We have accusations. I'm going to give you free stuff, and that's offensive. I mean, that is all that she is offering. She is saying, I'm going to do essentially what Obama's been doing, but in addition to that, free stuff. Let's get offended and racist, sexist, xenophobe, basket of deplorables. On the Trump side, he's saying, let's work, let's trade, let's not go into pointless wars. Those are issues, and talking about those issues has finally, at the very least, finally, we are actually having a national discussion about Islam and about immigration and about trade, about our economy. The fact that we can no longer ignore that we are working longer hours for less money, with fewer benefits and fewer hope. We have I think the home ownership rate is lower than it's been since like the 1950s or something like that, or the lowest it's been. And it's just no, it's gonna be before there's tons of homeowners in the 50s, so it would have had to be before then. It's just an awful number. Essentially, the American dream, the middle class, is falling apart. It's falling apart, and we can't ignore it anymore. I mean, this is when people get serious and passionate about politics like they're getting for Donald Trump, it is because that it is impacting their daily lives. And I can feel this myself. I know people all around me who can feel this. People who actually are working class people who have to get up and go to work and bring home a check or else they can't feed themselves, they're feeling it. And mentioning, I was going to bring back what you said about the FBI. So we just had a big release of information just 2 hours ago. So Clinton gets a second write-off here. I guess that 650,000 emails only takes a few days to go through. We're basically getting the same thing that we got, what was it, back in July, sometime in the summer when Comey came out and he said, well, you know, it basically, it looks like there was some bad stuff that went on here, some criminal behavior, but we're not going to press charges. We're not going to prosecute. So we're getting the same bullshit coming out from the FBI that we got months ago, 2 days before the election. I don't know how that does not just reek of corruption.
Well, it's important to note that the original investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server was just under a year and a half ago. And that was what I reported as being around 55,000 emails. So it took over a year to review 55,000 emails, and now it has taken 9 days to review 650,000. And keep in mind that the 650,000 emails, which granted may not all have had to do with anything. I mean, there could have been mundane emails. We don't know that they all had to do with, which is why it should have taken more than 9 days. So you have a situation where 650,000 emails that may have pertained to this case were found on essentially a pedophile's laptop, and it was it's important for our listeners to know that the reason this
I want to point out,
up,
just to interrupt you briefly there, it's not just any old pedophile. It's an elected official pedophile.
Yes, a former elected official who's has the most unfortunate last name of Weiner, and he, I guess they're separated now, but was married to Hillary Clinton's what she considered her second daughter, Huma Abedin. Her husband and father of her child. The NYPD was the one that actually was investigating Anthony Weiner, and they're the ones that pushed this issue. And according to reports, it was lower level FBI, the field agents and the NYPD who forced Comey's hand a little over a week ago to say that, look, there's 650,000 more emails. These need to be investigated. So he wrote a letter to Republicans and Democrats in Congress and announced the investigation was being reopened. And I would argue, under immense political pressure from the now completely compromised Department of Justice, the Comey has decided that there was nothing to see here. Move along.
I was just a little bit ago, I was watching an interview on Fox News where they had, I believe it was a former assistant director of the FBI. I did not catch his name, but he said something I thought was very interesting, and that I was kind of thought that this might be the case, or this would come up. He said that they were able to get through these emails so quickly, because that was brought up. They asked, well, these are a lot of emails to get through so quickly. Well, they were able to do that through automation. Now, by automation, I assume that this FBI official, former official, meant using some kind of a search engine, right? A find, uh, a prompt to the find box looking for keywords, or they could have just put it into some software app that said, "This is clean, move on." I don't know, but the point being here, whatever they did that was automated would be based on certain search criteria. So if they did, first of all, I'd ask, why didn't they use the same system for the first investigation? It took a year and a half. And secondly, why is it that, or what are the search criteria that they used? Because that would be very important information. I mean, if somebody easily wanted to just gloss over the whole thing and move right along so that Hillary can look squeaky clean in time for the election, they might have just said, put in a couple search boxes, like put in terrorist and put in, child porn or something, comes back clean. Oh, we're fine. I mean, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered here.
Right, and it's important to note that the Department of Justice, led by the horrible Loretta Lynch, has had her finger in this investigation, and it's questionable whether the investigation was actually an investigation. I think the entire FBI is compromised and has lost any sense of credibility, at least from the standpoint of the American public at this point. It really is astounding that Hillary Clinton has, if you count the reopening of this investigation as a separate investigation, she's been under and continues to be under one criminal investigation by the FBI. And she very well might be elected. She would be the first president elect ever under criminal investigation. And it's interesting that a lot of people find that acceptable.
Yes, it's interesting and appalling. And let's not forget, even if these criminal investigations hadn't been conducted, we still have a trail of dubious, corrupt, infiltrating connections between the Clintons and foreign governments, big corporate donors, banks, lobbyists. It's so obvious. It's so transparent. The very fact that she has more than 10% of approval from anyone in the entire country, that you take the whole country as a whole, the fact that she has anything more than 10% in the polls should be a great testament to just how far down our country has fallen.
Absolutely, and it's it's pretty funny that what was it, a few weeks ago, a couple months ago even, she was speaking to a union through some kind of video conference, and using her crazy eyes that I think she possibly had only taken half of her meds that day. She was screaming, "Why aren't I 50 points ahead?" So the fact that she feels like she should be 50 points ahead when under, at the time, two criminal investigations, and has been completely compromised through donations from foreign government. I mean, her State Department labeled Qatar a supporter of ISIS and a terrorist state. Meanwhile, she's accepting millions of dollars from the government of Qatar. I mean, and the fact that she feels like she should be 50 points ahead tells you, in all honesty, what a sociopath she is.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit of our predictions here, because that's what we really want to do. Is there anything else you want to mention before we get into that?
Well, just real quick, I think I think just briefly, can we mention the alleged scandals against Trump just to address
Oh
them
no, absolutely, absolutely.
just to be a little even-handed here. So there's been pretty much one scandal, if you want to call it that, against Trump this entire general election. There's been issues that the media has tried to blow up to no avail regarding taxes or Trump University, things that nobody cares about. Was the tape in capital letters, trademark, where Donald Trump was speaking with Billy Bush on a bus, which he thought was a private conversation, and uh, he was recorded saying he wants to, or he likes to, or has, can grab women by the genitals, and says basically he's basically bragging about being an alpha male, and saying that if he, women want him in sexual ways, um, basically saying that he basically can get women if he wants them, despite the fact that he admitted in that same tape that despite trying, he was turned down by a woman. And this was national news for a couple weeks. It was brought up in the second debate, and I think has relatively died down, and most people have forgotten about it. What I think is interesting about that, before we actually maybe talk a little bit more about the substance of it, is that it's now known that this tape was being held, that the media had access to this tape since the summer. I think it was NBC, and was holding on to it, presumably for an October surprise. But with the advent of WikiLeaks releasing John Podesta's now well over 50,000 pages of emails, they felt like they had to release it right then to blunt some of the force of those emails that were being released from WikiLeaks. And we very well could be talking about that right now because it may have been released this week. Who knows? But it's interesting the timing of that tape. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the timing in general, it's very clear that the media is orchestrating timed events. I'm even questioning now if the FBI is orchestrating timed events purposefully to sway and manipulate public opinion. So now it's not just, we're already pretty much used to them screaming in our faces about what we're supposed to think and insulting us when we don't agree with them, as far as the mainstream media, the politicians, the government, the whole, this corrupt entity. Um, but now we have the actual news itself being, in other words, the events themselves are being released. And this isn't new to this election, of course, but this really illustrates it to a whole new level. The orchestration of the releasing of these events, of these stories at select times, to specifically camouflage and to distract from very serious issues. And we remember this was going on last year as well when the TPP was being signed, and I think it was Cecil the Lion came out, and there was a
Yes.
rebel flag came out, and there's all this. Everybody's so offended, and it's just losing your minds instead of being worried about losing your jobs. um, yeah, so I think I firmly believe that there's a lot of orchestration of the timing of a lot of these events.
Absolutely. And the playbook for Democrats, or more generally the left, but we'll say Democrats because they're the only relevant left political party right now in the United States, has been to label people as racist, sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, anti everything. Uh, Now it's funny that Donald Trump was never labeled a that he hates women and he's racist until he became a Republican and ran against Hillary Clinton. That's kind of funny, but it really reeks of desperation from the sense of that's really all they have. I mean, Donald Trump did, if you believe the polls, he dipped a couple points in the polls, um, but and he kind of stayed there for a while, and it wasn't until maybe 2 weeks ago that he started coming back up. But in the large scheme of things, it had relatively little impact. And I think the fact that we didn't see anything else regarding any hidden tape or any hidden audio or anything like that shows that they really do not have anything left in their bag of tricks, and that's really all they had. I mean, it's not like they had a hidden tape of Donald Trump saying, "You know what? I hate I hate average people, and I really love NAFTA. I'm just saying that to get elected, and I want this country to be overrun by illegal immigrants." That would force Donald Trump to that would force the issues, and this
That sounds
campaign
like a lot of something that another one of those candidates said.
exactly. Um, but that would make this campaign about the issues, and that's not what they're about.
Right.
And I give Donald Trump, who has been in politics for a little over a year, I give him credit for making it this far and sticking to the issues, although he has been distracted quite a bit, admittedly. But overall, sticking to the issues and forcing Hillary Clinton's hands uh, on the issues, the fact that she doesn't even want to address them.
Yeah.
So, go
He's
ahead.
been consistent. His issue positions. There's been a few places where he's changed a little bit, but as far as what we're used to seeing in elections, he's stayed very consistent. And that's something that is very refreshing to a lot of people. And let's not remember, this is all being propelled by people being fed up. People are fed up in the United States. We're tired of it. I mean, it's happening in Europe as well, but for this election specifically, people are really fed up. They're tired of working harder, being told they're just a bunch of sexist, racist bigots, that they should basically just roll over and die. I mean, there was that, I forget who it was in the media, came out, I guess it was earlier in the year, where they said, white Americans should just die off. um,
Yes, I believe it. Maybe there was somebody else, but who I'm thinking of is like Kevin or Kelvin Williamson of is it the National Review, where he said that the working class white and middle class white folks are nothing but meth heads, and their culture is ugly and dirty, and they just need to die off.
yeah, exactly. Basically, the people who built this country and are still maintaining it, they need to die off so we can just enact a giant socialist utopia. And that's not even coming from a progressive. I mean, at least somebody who doesn't claim to be a progressive.
Right.
So, yeah, no, it's awful. But this is another thing that I find is very just shows the lack of understanding is when people say that Trump is making America angry. America's been angry for a long time. He's just tapping into it. He doesn't. No, no one person has the ability to get up and then just make an entire country angry where there was no anger. That would be some really charismatic authority. Um, People are already fed up. People have been angry for quite some time. A lot of people, especially, well, on both sides of the aisle, honestly, but especially on the right, because the right has been marginalized severely over the past couple decades, made fun of, abused, ridiculed by everybody in the mainstream media, by Hollywood, by the celebrities, by the elites and the ruling class. A lot of people have been waiting quietly for decades for somebody to come along and actually stand up for them. Bush sure as hell didn't do it. Obama didn't do it. And Trump's coming along, and he's different. He's not part of the system, and he's been consistent, and he appears to be sincere. And that's something that if it were so easy to manipulate people to just follow somebody like that, they had no desire to from the beginning, then the left would have used this a long time ago. They would have just put these. Well, I guess they did with Obama to a certain extent, but it wasn't based on being fed up. It was more of just this hopeful change. Oh, hope and change. Yeah, hopeful change. We got neither of those things. But yeah, it's a movement then, and regardless, The election outcomes, regardless of the outcome of the election, the movement is not going to disappear. And this is why I say that if Hillary's elected, we'll be moving. An economic collapse is going to happen if we keep running the course that we're at. There's just no way around it. The numbers just don't add up. And if that happens, and people are still pissed off, and they've been ridiculed and they've been attacked, and by that point, Hillary Clinton will have probably enacted some additional laws or executive orders to erode civil rights in this country even further. If that occurs, I could see the United States balkanizing to the point of splitting, like people wanting to secede, wanting to get away from the central authority in Washington. At the point we're at now, it's just you take it a little bit further. You get people, you get the average person to the point where they are having trouble buying food at the end of the week, and that anger will boil over one way or another.
That's right. And I think that's why Trump's message has been so successful is that he, unlike other Republicans, takes his message out of the abstract and puts it into terms that people can associate with their everyday lives. And so while Hillary Clinton is talking about uh, abstracts, he's talking about what he's going to do for you specifically. And I think that's why he's gained so much popularity. Um, so, I mean, do you want to talk about predictions?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I'd like to let's split this up into a second video right here, and I'll make the prediction video separate for anybody who just wants to check that out. So if you want the predictions, check the next video. I'll put a link to it in the description, and it'll be on the channel, of course.